Welcome back, all my 40K fanatics out there. I'm DJ here with Tim's Nation, and as you can tell by the title of this video, I have lied. We are playing Agents again. And the reason being is that even after getting absolutely smushed by Death Guard, I don't feel like that was a valid testament of what we have learned with the Agents on the channel, how much we have grown with the Agents on the channel. And so now it's time to kind of take a lot of that information, spin it around, and try and put something else together. So today we will be bringing the Agents back. And this is where I'm getting into the column of the best of. When I typically like to play an army or trying an army for a first time, as I've said this before, I like to go overboard into certain units, playing many of them, maybe too many of them, but to be able to get them, make sure that I have the opportunities to test theories. Because if a unit could potentially possess multiple roles on the battlefield, I'd like to see that. And there are some other roles that they could pose and want to see how they function in that. Combat, shooting, objective controlling, all those things. Last video, we were trying out the Grey Knights. The one unit that has Deep Strike in it inherently in the Codex, as well as a unit that comes with a 2-up, 4-up, a toughness 5, and 3 wounds. So I wanted to see, hey, we have a strong secondary game. Let's go ahead and put more into that secondary game. Unfortunately, as we noticed, not having the ability to up down the Terminators is very, very weakening to them. And a lot of the other stratagems, and possibly squad size, makes them not quite as efficient. As someone made a comment in one of the previous videos, and Lane and myself are having this exact same conversation, one of the difficult things to look away from is the fact that 3 squads of Voidsmen at Arms plus the enhancement is 160 points versus the 190 that the Terminators cost. And that's kind of where a lot of this went in today. For this list, there are some interesting aspects within the Imperial Agents which kind of take some of the changes and flips on their head. Whereas typically we put a character in a unit to make the unit stronger, it's interesting how some of the units can actually make the character stronger, viciously stronger. And that's going to be a lot of the aspects of some of my offenses going to be playing on today, as well as the fact of the return of the Death Watch. You know, we had them in one list. They did very, very well. They seemed like a staple. I wanted to go a different direction for a minute here, but we're right back on it. You know, we kind of knew that Imperial Agents would have to run that Death Watch kill team just because of how strong they are, how hard they hit, how fast they can move, especially with the advance and charge. It seemed inevitable that the Death Watch kill team were going to remain. So that's kind of where a lot of this came in, was a stop, wipe the board clean, and go, okay, what have we learned from these last 3 games? We're 1-2 with a win over the Votann and a loss in the Custodes and Death Guard, 2 of the more resilient armies in the game. Lane will be bringing Space Marines this time. And I do happen to know on accident that Lane is bringing 2 Whirlwinds. So that's going to make some of my deployment choices kind of interesting. I'm going to have to see the rest of his list before I can fully make decisions, because the Whirlwinds can actually hurt in a lot of ways that I don't like. Granted, their artillery is always going to be hitting on 4s and can never be improved past that, but the fact that they can, I don't really have an answer for them, and they can pretty much shell most of my infantry units for the majority of the game. So we're going to need to play around that a little bit here. And as well, just trying to establish a strong board control with some of the damage that we do have out of the units that we're bringing today. So there is some good news. As I mentioned, I'm considering strongly on taking this in November to an RTT just for fun. Currently, I'm going to say it now, I've been undefeated at one of our stores that we go to for RTTs, and that's Battlegrounds and Board Games. I've been undefeated in RTTs there. So, best way to get the loss out of the way. Let's take Imperial Agents and go, okay, we got that taken care of. And, but, you know, and it's just all in fun and games for that sense. It's just, I've had a very strong winning streak at this specific game store. So let's get that loss in there. Let's get that out of the way. And, yeah, have some fun with it too. I mean, it's Imperial Agents. As many have said, no one expects the Inquisition, right? Now, The good news as well with this is that since I'm practicing for a tournament, I'm taking it very seriously. On top of that, since we're taking to a tournament, that means we need something that isn't proxied. We are 1 week away from having this army legitimate on the channel. Today is going to be the last day of the Necron Warrior Subductor proxy. Got those in the mail. Lane got a box he's bringing over. I'm going to be putting together. And yeah, the only proxy that's going to remain is going to be Shark Draxus because that's a good luck charm. But as you'll note with today, we have a Draxus. I just want to play with the Shark. All right. I don't have a full army picture right now, so we're going to jump right into the list because, like I said, Lane has some stuff that he's bringing over because we're mishmashing this together to get this all assembled so it's legal. So until I meet up with Lane before we play this game, still got kind of still missing a couple of pieces. But let's talk about the list and what we got here today. So for starters, we have quite a few characters. And the first and foremost is in our assassin column. So our assassins that we're looking at today are going to be the Vindicare Assassin and the Calidus Assassin. These ones are the ones that I feel I can shimmy out the easiest to be able to go into the Eversor or the Caluxus. And depending on how much infantry Lane is bringing today, the Eversor may be taking the place of the Vindicare. I doubt that there's going to be a psychic influence that's going to want me to take the Caluxus. So I have a feeling that it's going to end up being Calidus Eversor, but we'll see when I get the full view of the list. Calidus, you know, she can up down and is really good at secondary scoring. And the Eversor, which we're planning on moving in, is just a strong anti-infantry beat stick. So some of the things like Centurions or, what are they, Eradicators, that could be a problem for me. More the Centurions because of the missiles. The Eversor could get in there and kind of mess them up a bit. Now, the Vindicare is in the list because of his point cost, and it's easy to shimmy him out into something else. The Vindicare did extremely well into the Death Guard, being able to pick off characters left and right. That's where it's going to matter is how many characters Lane has and how effective is it going to be to remove them from a unit. Other things that are nice with it is just because of the high strength of the Vindicare's weapon and the high damage, it would not be a bad idea into things like Centurion that Lane typically brings to be able to use the Vindicare to simply pick Centurions off one by one by one. His high damage, high AP, he can take them out pretty easily. So even not on the anti-character aspect of it, just being able to hit and remove such strong infantry like that would be very valuable. Next up, we'll move over into the Armiger Helverins. So we do have two Armiger Helverins today. We dropped the Armigers, switched it up for a bit. Because of me having the Death Watch in here, which we'll talk about in a minute, I wanted to have more fire support. And the one last week did some damage, but not enough. So I feel like I want to double up on this. We tried the Warglaves. I like them. That Melta is nice, but I also need something that can be able to pop open rhinos and take the middle vehicles down. Now, granted, these guys are only AP 1, but because they're long range, we can get them into a position to be able to hit those mid-range vehicles and take them out so that we can get to the candy-coated insides of infantry to get out in the field. On top of that, there's still damage 3. So, you know, when you shoot at 3 wound models, any save, that's a guy. You know, I mean, Terminators, you pour these guys into a squad of Terminators and you get 4 or 5 wounds. Yeah, they got a 3-up save because you're AP 1, but every failed save is a Terminator remove. So there is some value still behind him there. I am switching over to the Meltagun today over the Stubber. I feel like the Stubber does nothing. The Meltagun may not do anything, but I feel like the Meltagun has a better chance of doing something over the Stubber not doing anything. All right. Well, let's go over to the characters first because this is going to matter. So first off, we do have our Rogue Trader Entourage. They're going to be going with a squad of Breachers. The Rogue Trader Entourage has one of my enhancements. This is the enhancement. I can't remember the name offhand, but it allows me to use one of the 3 agents strat from the Navy fleet for free. This allows me that for 1 command point, I can give these guys sustained hits as well as ignore cover, even though they have that ability for themselves once per game. and then give them +1 strength, +1 AP when shooting at a unit within 12 inches. And being that the range of these guys is pretty much 12 inches, that's fine. So that's a nice little bonus to be able to give these guys a heavier damage output. As we'll mention a couple of times, breachers have reroll wounds versus units on objective markers. One's normally, but we're going to focus on shooting at units on objective markers in some way, shape, or form. The Rogue Trader Entourage also has some weird damage aspects and outputs just to come from their squad alone. And they will give infiltrate to the squad they join, as well as the D3 redeploy for battle line units, which, as we've mentioned before, the armatures are battle line as well. So these guys are going to have that enhancement to give them a little more punch, to be able to hit a little bit harder. I may not use both stratagems in succession because of some other tricks that we're trying to play here, but that is part of the game. Next up to be attached to a breacher squad is going to be Draxus. Draxus is not going to be a big target for a lot of stratagems, but there are some good ones to target her with. The big kicker is just how much damage she can do versus infantry units. And again, the breacher's giving that reroll to wounds, combined with the devastating wound mechanic on her weapons, means that she can tear through stuff as well. Now, when we talk about things like the Rogue Traders, Draxus, and our third character, the Inquisitor, these are being attached to an 85-point unit. This is all around not that expensive when you look at the character plus the unit, and then you start considering the damage output. In a lot of ways, I'm looking at the breachers as additional wounds for the Inquisitors and the damage they can do. Last piece is the Inquisitor. So the Inquisitor has a 2d6 flamer that is devastating wounds, which devastating wounds on anything that can reroll wounds is very powerful, allowing you to fish for those 6s for automatic damage. The Inquisitor also allows that whenever you target the unit with a stratagem on a 3-up, you gain the command points back. Or the command point back. So this means that using some of these little strats to go for +1 AP, maybe a 4-up invuln, or even a grenade strat, we're still going to be able to have the command points to move further along, meaning that we can make the command points go further for a lot of these units in this army, especially considering that a lot of the stratagems are not overwhelming in their own right, but if we can get more and more of them functioning, then we start to be able to have a little bit of damage to be able to start removing things from objective markers. I know what a lot are going to say. This is not a damage-dealing army, and I get that, but we still need to be able to put some pressure on units on objective markers to be able to push the game forward. As we noticed last week with the Grey Knights, not being able to do enough damage can mean we lose board presence fast and we're not able to recover it. Now, last into the characters is of the agent side of things is our Navigator. So Navigator, I got to do a lot of thinking about this game because once again, we mentioned the Whirlwinds. And the Navigator, in some ways, I plan on just letting him hang out in the back by himself. 12-inch deep strike denial is big. In most matchups, he can just hang out. But with the Whirlwinds being present, he is a very squishy target. So he may have to spend a little bit of time in some of our Rhinos before he gets on the field in that aspect. I don't think one of my Voidsman squads is going to be the target for him because, once again, Whirlwinds can just absolutely shred the Voidsman and he'll just be gone all the same. So I think he might have to spend a little time in the Rhinos at the beginning of the game. He, as well as the Inquisitor, come with enhancements. The enhancements that I put on these two are to give 3 units Infiltrate and 3 units Deep Strike. These must be infantry units, by the way. Now, this game, we might have to tweak some of that up, but as I was mentioning to Lane, there's a lot of times that we take enhancements in other armies that we only grab 1 unit to put in Deep Strike, 1 unit to give Infiltrate to. So even if I can only do 2 units with a Deep Strike or 2 units with Infiltrate, I'm okay with that because of the value behind how many I can. Also, the Whirlwinds are kind of an offset weird matchup, which might change some stuff for me all around. Now, out of those characters, we also are going to have a Watchmaster leading the 10-man squad of Death Watch. Watchmaster, he doesn't have any enhancements, and he is just as he comes, which is mean and ready to beat up some Marines. He has Lance as it is. He gives advance in charge, and he also reduces Strat's command points by 1. Again, another way to help keep CP and help keep these strats going, which is a trend that I'm building into a lot of this army, is to make that command point very, very easy to keep this rolling. while the Inquisitor gives me the CP back, the Watchmaster reduces it. So that's pretty cool. And also, we are bringing Artemis. Artemis is going to be floating by himself. Artemis is probably going to have Infiltrate as one of my units to infiltrate. Artemis can stand back up when he dies. Artemis is an excellent unit for secondaries, and he's a beat stick in his own right. So, Artemis, welcome to the game. Now we go back over into some of the units. As I mentioned, we have 3 squads of Breachers that are going to be with a Rogue Trader, Draxus, and the Inquisitor. We have all 3 squads of Breachers today. Isn't that going to be a beautiful thing? So the Breachers have reroll wounds when they're shooting at a unit on an objective or fighting it. Very strong, and that's what I'm going to buff a lot of the Inquisitor behind. We do have one model with a 4-up. We have a Melt-A-Gun. And then we have the ability to grenade strat at additional range, which is one thing I'd like to use more of because I feel like that is a very critical way that we can get some damage out there, especially coming out of a vehicle. Now, the Rogue Trader Entourage Squad is going to be put on the board because they can infiltrate, and I can also pick them up with as one of the D3 units and guarantee that this is at least one unit they can get picked up before the game begins so they can zone out and then come back or go into strategic. The other 2 are going to be in Rhinos. This is going to protect them since they're a little bit softer and squishier and allow them to get out 3 inches, have that extra boosted move, and yeah, all around, just be able to get in people's face. And the last unit that's going to go into Rhinos is going to be, oh, and by the way, with the Breachers, we have all the combat weapons in them. So we do have Chain Fist, power weapons, all that jazz. Now, the last unit to go into vehicles is going to be, as I said, the 10-man kill team. This is an all-out combat kill team. 4 shields, 4 hammers, the blades, and the Xenophase blade on the Sergeant. What else can I say there? These guys hit like a truck. I did the 5-mans. I like the 5-mans. I liked having the versatility. Now that I'm using the Breachers out of Rhinos, I feel a little more comfortable going into these this is a 10-man, just as a complete wrecking house, but they will also be in a Rhino. As I mentioned, we have 3 Rhinos in this list. They are going to have the Breachers and the Deathwatch kill team. I really like Rhinos out of Inquisition, as I've mentioned before. These are things that are annoying for your opponent to have to deal with. They can complete secondaries later into things. They can tank shock to prevent your opponent from being able to charge, and tank shock, I guess, as well. And just be very, very annoying in some matchups, especially considering now when we talk about the Whirlwind, by putting the units inside this, these guys can really defend. Now, the Whirlwinds, yes, they can hit and they can do some damage, but I have a better survivability of the Whirlwind with the Rhino than I do of my little squishy infantry squads. Speaking of little squishy infantry squads, we're going to take 5 of the Void's Men-at-Arms. And as you can see, we do have the conversions that we're going to be using. The only thing that's going to switch out is little doggies instead of servitors. We have a special treat when Lane digs them out. That's all I'll say for right now. These guys are all going to go into Deep Strike. Simple as that. I'm putting all of them in Deep Strike with the enhancement, and they will drop in and do what I need them to do for secondaries, and that is their role. That is their goal. They're taken as they are. They have shotguns. They have a Gatling cannon. There's really not any damage you're getting out of these guys at all. And even going into other small units that do the same thing, they're very, very weak. But they're very, very cheap. 50 points for these units each. So this is an excellent Deep Strike unit. It will really help me into late game for secondaries. That's the plan. And last, as I mentioned, are Necron Subjugators. Last time for these guys. Subjugators, 3-up with a 4-up invuln and a fight on death mechanic. Into combat armies, these guys are excellent to be able to slow things down and wall. This game, I have to be very careful because, again, now I don't want to give the Whirlwinds too much to shoot at, and if I pull everything off the board, these are going to be the guys that get hit. Now, a little bit tougher, a little more resilience, a little bit extra to be able to get through it, but with the toughness 3, they're going to get hit pretty quickly. These guys are interesting for just how resilient they are because of how much damage they can actually take before they go down, and that means that they can get into a better position across the field in general, just to be able to score secondaries. In the previous game, although we didn't fare very well, one of these squads was able to score a bunch of points on behind enemy lines just because a couple dudes survived because of that 4-up invuln. So that's going to be a very positive play. Being able to block my opponent into their deployment zone is nice, but is risky because if you don't go first, these guys can end up being a leapfrog for your opponent to charge, remove, and get closer to you. And even if they don't fully remove them, their durability is nice, but a combat unit getting 2 turns to hit them most likely will remove them with that toughness 3, meaning that your opponent can charge, hit you, stay in combat where they don't get shot at, finish you off during your turn, and then be free to move and charge in the next turn. A little risky, just got to watch on how we play it. All right, so that's the list. As I mentioned, we got the subjugators coming, so next week if I run this thing again, we will see the full Inquisition list. This one, I feel like we're getting closer to finishing the puzzle and seeing the bigger picture. We have the capability now of taking these characters and giving them reroll wounds to be able to push through the damage. Now, that doesn't mean that Draxus is going to eliminate a squad by herself, or the Inquisitor, or the Rogue Traders. But what it means is that 2 of those squads can hit a higher value target and do enough damage to reduce it to a point where it may not be as effective going into it. Another big thing is to remember with the demolition charges, being able to use the demo charges, the single demo charge to do a little bit of extra damage. They do hit on 5s, but D6 shots blast. And if you're doing the +1 to wound into a target, or +1 to hit into a target, off their ability, their detachment ability, could put a bit of damage on them, plus with the rerolls. So there is some extra there. A lot of it is nickel and diming the damage. Being able to take things like the Inquisitor, turn them up, where they're not wiping a squad, but they're doing reliable damage, so that then Draxus and the Inquisitor, or Draxus and the Rogue Traders, whatever the combo may be, can isolate a target and do a lot of damage to it. Ways that we isolate it, using the subjugators. Being able to not only create a wall, but charge and hold other units back so that our other units can eliminate targets as we see fit. And last in that mix is going to be the Rhinos. Rhinos just able to get in the way, create walls, and be defensive to prevent the shooting units from completely getting obliterated off the field before we have time to at least eliminate our targets and then try to continue across the field. We have a lot of abilities to have a lot of board presence. That doesn't mean that we're going to go that deep with it. Doesn't mean we're going to end up across the field and doing all this stuff. It just means we have that capability. So whatever cards we draw, which just will be on tactical, whatever cards we draw, we can have the ability to score without. And that was, well, final note is with the tactical or fixed objectives. With this army, I feel like if I go into fixed, because of how soft some of these units are, it's very easy to say, okay, I'm going to do this to prevent you from being able to do these fixed objectives. And with the units like the Calidus and the deep striking units, etc., I'm able to change the mode depending on what cards I draw and score those as we see fit. So I feel a little bit safer behind the tactical objectives than I do behind the fixed secondaries. If I had a higher damage output, yes, there's the opportunity to go into fixed when Assassinate or Bring It Down becomes available. But at this time, I'm going to stick with tactical and see how it feels in the end of it all. We do have the Inquisitor to gain command points back, so pitching is not necessarily the best route to go. So we'll see. We'll see how that goes and if those two kind of get in the way of each other. I think that anything that gains command points has the capability of getting in the way of the CP generation, but at the same time, it also doesn't. What if you get on a good cycle for the first 2 turns and are able to score both secondaries, and now you're behind on command points where you're not able to push that offense forward like you'd want to? So having kind of the redundancy in that column of playing tactical for the command point pitch on the cards, as well as the Inquisitor to gain the CP back, means that we should be able to start building a plan around having command points to do these abilities over the course of the game. Those are my thoughts. There we go. Inquisition, round 4. Let's do it. As always, guys, thanks for watching. We'll talk to you again soon.